Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I'm Joe. With me is Greg, as always. We're in the thick of this college basketball season. Football season's over now that the Super Bowl's done, so a lot of people will be tuning in for the first time for college basketball content. We're just happy to have them along with us for this fun last month and a half of the season. Greg, how are you doing?
That Super Bowl last night was exhilarating, but I'm hoping for that sort of feeling all throughout March, and it is really just around the window. I think I heard somewhere we're 5 weeks yesterday from Selection Sunday or something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but we're getting close.
We are definitely getting close. We have a lot to get to in this show. Some of it we'll probably just gloss over because it's just this. That's how crazy this season has been. But let's start with the thing that could impact college basketball the most long term, and that is Dartmouth players have been ruled as employees of the university, which means they can organize a union. They're starting to organize a union. That's going to leave a lot of different changes moving forward. Now, there might be lawsuits from Dartmouth against the players saying they're not employees, so it could turn into a legal battle, but it's a good first step in the direction of, hey, these kids are spending at minimum 20 hours per week on the basketball activities for a school or football, whatever sport they're playing, and they should be treated as employees. That'll change just about everything and maybe could straighten out some of this NIL stuff, Greg.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they're already getting. We already have step one. They're already getting paid. They're already working the hours. Like you said. Like I'm not. Besides, I'm not smart enough to know how unionizing would affect all this. That's a conversation for another day. Something I'd want to do a lot more reading before I gave an opinion on. But like they're basically already employees anyway. Like you think about how many hours a week they put into basketball, and they're going to school, and I mean, this is just putting the rubber stamp on that. This is probably one of those things that like it's going to sit in court systems, just like you kind of said. There's going to be lawsuits back and forth, and we may get something kind of like with NIL where actual changes happen before anything goes into law. But you know, my only worry is that if this becomes like a pseudo professional league, then like I don't want to compete with the NBA. I like, and this is me personally. Like, I like college basketball. And then, in April when it's over, I take a look at the NBA standings. I kind of don't want them to be competing. You don't see any scenario where that becomes a reality, do you?
Not any more than they already do, just for basketball fans. I think this will actually help that notion because, if college athletes start getting paid, that's everything. So it's probably not going to be what people envision. Oh, these guys will make $40,000 salaries. Like they might still get that on NIL, which that market will cool down a little bit. There might be some more regulations if players can unionize. That's the good news. But the actual salaries for playing their sport, if they say college athletes are employees, then yes, the field hockey team needs to be paid. This team needs to be paid. It's not going to be as drastic as you think, but I think they will get more benefits. They will have a little bit of pay going forward, and it's good to unionize. And honestly, this could help schools and universities too. Like, hey, maybe it's transfer portal is closed. We're going to agree the transfer portal is closed from this time to this time, or you have to stay 2 years at a college unless you get a waiver because of some health issues or something. Like, it's going to change things for the better. I think for both sides instead of having this unregulated heap of whatever's going on with NIL all the time.
And just to bring closure to what Joe's talking about, he's mentioning that that's basically stuff that's going to be collectively bargaining, because that is the one thing that will impact once they're unionized and their employees. Everything's up in the air right now. There's no rules. Everything that Joe just mentioned, I'm not going to rehash it, but what that would bring into play is a collective bargaining agreement of, whatever you want to call it, something of that nature. So we could put some defined lines on, all of this stuff. So it may give more clarity, honestly. Like right now today, it's like, man, because we have no idea what it's actually going to look like, but these terms are going to eventually, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, maybe not 5-10 years. I don't know. It's just the court system is the court system. So, but that's kind of what Joe's getting at there.
Oh, absolutely. So let's get to stuff that is going to happen more in the short term because, like we said, there may be some lawsuits going on there and a lot of figuring out to do. Especially other schools are reaching out to those Dartmouth players and they're trying to say, "Hey, we support you. How can we get involved?" That type of thing. There's a lot of things to be happening in that. Let's get this what happened last week in college basketball. We'll start last Monday. Greg, Kansas State upsets Kansas. You know to throw the records out when these two teams plays, no matter how much that I maybe said that I don't think Kansas State's that great. They get the win here. Kansas State puts themselves back in a position to be back in position to get into the tournament. It's something that's been fun to say the last couple of weeks for people who are following a bunch of different teams who are on the bubble. Still on the outside looking in there. And Kansas, some of their issues are still there. I think you have to be impressed with their week overall. We're going to get to their game against Baylor in a second, so I won't spend too much time on them. But for Kansas State, mostly just getting back on the bubble.
Yeah, you mentioned throw the records out. If I'm remembering correctly, we're only a couple years removed from Silvio De Sousa picking up a chair. That was, I can't remember which arena it was at, but that was this
Mm-hmm.
matchup. That can't be more than I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago. So when you're right, man. Throw it at the wall and see what sticks. You and I are both like Kansas State. Hey, they're going to take a step back. This is a good win for them. They're a very bubbly team. Honestly, if you roll down most of the Big 12 teams, they're kind of all bubbly. It's I don't think you can definitively say anything about any of these Big 12 teams outside of like 2 or 3 of them. The rest of them is just kind of depend on how they finish. Most teams have 8, 9 games left, and then Kansas State's just going. I mean, if they go 2-8 or whatever, and they're probably out. If they go 4-5, it's good chance they're in. Just being in the Big 12.
I don't even know if 4 and 5 gets them in at this rate, honestly, with how the other teams in the Big 12 will fare. But point is there that they put themselves back on the bubble. They need to get some good wins down the stretch to get there. Let's go on to Tuesday here, Greg. We have Clemson beating North Carolina. Now, we said we weren't going to mention Clemson until they got a win.
I'm sorry, you said what team?
Yeah, okay. But I said they were going to beat a team, pull off an upset, and get everyone to kind of hope again. And they got the hope back. They're after this game, they were 5-6 in conference, under 500 in the ACC, and a bad ACC. So they get the win to give everyone hope. They're on the right side of the bubble right now. But this is like we've seen this movie so many times where this is the win where they get you to come back in and kind of, oh, maybe they have something here. So Brad Brownell's very much in that you have to prove it to us category of, hey, I think they can maybe piss this thing away, even like with the last 5 games of the season. They just lose 5 in a row.
Dude, first of all, if anybody wants next week's lotto numbers, ask Joe. He's had some pretty good calls this year, and this is one of them. I just don't. This is like the flip flop of what we've seen this year. This is a top 5 team losing, at home to an unranked team, instead of that opposite trend that we've seen this year, where top 5 teams are going on the road and just losing, or top 10, whatever. I don't know, man. I just. You've already hashed out who's good on this team. PJ Hall's electric. I think it was Andy Katz might have named him as player of the week or something. It was him or one of those guys that I follow. I follow anybody regardless of what you have here, just for news stuff and stuff. But this is obviously a good win for them. It's a win on the road. Who knows, man? With this team, we've done this dance not just this year, but in years past. I'm not ready to make anything definitive. I will make no decisions on this team until if they get another big win, here in the next week or two. All right, but it's still the ACC. This is a league where they're going to have to be really. They're going to have to beat the teams they're supposed to beat, and they're going to have to pick up a win against the team that are maybe not projected to beat or not favored to beat. That's their roadmap right now.
Yeah, like I said, they were under 500 after this game, after this win. So just a lot of work to do in a conference that's just so bad. So and they've lost a lot of these games to these teams that they should have beat. So something to keep in mind here is that we might be mentioning them more than we anticipated down the stretch. Greg, Iowa State beats Texas on the road. This is huge for Iowa State. They're surging by their results this past week. They're moving up to number 10 in the AP poll. Their defense was stifling in the first half of this game. They held Texas to 19 points. At times, they're stifling overall, only giving up 62 points per game. The Iowa State team, I think, started off as one of those teams in the middle of the pack, Big 12. Like, we're trying to figure out who they are. And now it's kind of like, okay, maybe they're number 3 in the Big 12. Maybe they're that team. Or maybe they're number 4 if you like Baylor or something like that. That's kind of how I see them now, where those 3 or 4 teams, I'm pretty sure we know they're in the tournament, and they're going to be tough outs in the tournament. The rest of them are who we're trying to figure out.
Hey, number 3 or number 4 in the Big 12, that's a great place to be, especially getting ready for March. I don't think we're going to have one of those kind of, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago, the Big 10 put in like 8 or 9 teams, and they were all but 2 of them were out before the second weekend. Or maybe that was the AC. I can't remember. I think all of these teams are strong candidates. It's just going to depend on how the bracket breaks down. This game was of particular interest just because of how Texas has been playing lately, and then we saw that emotional ending of the Baylor Iowa State game. Just a couple days before this. One of the things I like from Iowa State, it wasn't just one guy. Their leading scorer, Momcilovic, has 13. So when Lipsy has 12, they were getting production from all over. They got darn near 30 bench points. From four different guys. That's good. I don't want to compare them to Kentucky, but just kind of one of those things. That's like, hey, you start going down the list of options. That's what we like to see for a team that can go deep. You can deal with an injury or two here or there. Yes, you have to work out the rotation and who should be here or there. We see some teams struggle with having too many good options, but Dylan DeSuke, great game for him. That Texas team is still progressing, beyond where I think we thought they'd be. I think you and I had both kind of written them off once they dropped out of the top 25. There's still a chance for them. They're just in that category of we'll have to keep an eye on them. But I'm with you on Iowa State. I think they're for real. TJ Otzelberger is doing a great job out there. I think this is his third or fourth season out there, or somewhere around there. But he's got that team rolling.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever fully quit Texas. We'll see how they do down the stretch. Iowa State reminds me a lot of those early 2000 Xavier teams under Thad Matta and Sean Miller. You might think, oh, why? I mean, they're a smaller conference team. The balanced scoring and the tough defense they provide is why they could have guys who lead the team with 12, 13 points, but they win games and the defense is stifling. Iowa State, let's be honest, yeah, they've had some good years the past couple of years, but as a program, they're still the underdogs, right? If they're going up against Kentucky, North Carolina, even Baylor, who's like more of a new blood, right? We talk about them. Like Iowa State's still like the program underdog. So it's fun to see a team that is balanced, that plays defense like that. Excited to see what they can do. This week they play against Cincinnati, so there's a lot of tough games left, and I think they can do well. Greg, let's bang out the Nevada games back to back here. I know we try to keep it chronological, but it just makes too much sense to talk about Nevada here. Nevada beats Utah State on Tuesday night, 77-63. They were 4-4 in the Mountain West before this game, so they go to 5-4 with this win. Now, we talked about how they were in trouble of slipping down the bubble rankings and possibly missing the tournament if they didn't have a big week. And what do? On Friday, they beat San Diego State. They get two big wins, so now they're 6-4 in the Mountain West. They were 6th in the Mountain West. They're moving up the standings, and that gets the whole ball rolling here, Greg, of like, it looked like last week, like, yeah, it was going to trend down to like maybe 3 or 4 teams. Now it's looking like it could be 5 or 6 teams because of the results we're seeing around the country and because Nevada kind of dug their heels in and got this win when I don't think we expected them to get maybe 1 or maybe even definitely not 2.
Yeah, this is a pretty good week for them. Just like you said, picking up both of these wins. This is a team that I think we both kind of agreed that their schedule was kind of light, or their big wins were kind of light, and they picked up 2 quad 1 wins in a week. That would be good for any team in the country, especially with just the way things are going. They're still only sitting at 47th in the net, so I don't think they're a shoe-in for the tournament, but they did themselves plenty of favors this week.
Definitely. Like I said, if you start sliding down towards double-digit losses in the Mountain West, that's where you kind of get in that danger zone. They had 2 double-digit loss teams make it last year. You just don't want to be on the chopping block. So a lot of teams, like I said, are digging in their heels here and going to try to make the tournament. It's good. Mountain West basketball is definitely worth watching. The last game on Tuesday, we'll recap. Baylor beat Texas Tech. Now, Greg, I don't have too much to say to this one because we're going to talk about the Baylor-Kansas game as well, but I will say, impressed with their offense. They can get it from tons of different players. Kobe Walter, Ray J. Dennis. I like that about them, and I think Scott Drew still proving to be one of the best coaches in the country because I'm not sure I like this team at the start of the season. I think this is a team that, even with the defensive flaws, could be a very tough out in March.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about Texas Tech. Out of the top 25 this afternoon. They're just another one of those middling Big 12 teams that I don't know. And I don't want to get too much into Baylor because we're going to talk about Baylor, Kansas, but there's just one name that you didn't mention here and now that we have mentioned this year. Yves Missi has 17 in this game, and I believe it was 21 in the Kansas game. So just like you said, man, they can get it from several places. I know we kind of said early in the year or at some point you had a concern like, man, if Jacoby Walter's only getting them 8 points, like what is this team? Well, now they got, Missi, none, Ray J. Dennis is kicking. Jalen Bridges only had 7 points in this game. So, this team, there's a lot to like about this team. There's, you can't can't not say this about anyone, but there are some flaws, of course. You like to see the defense be a little better, but I mean, I think I'm with you. Third, fourth in the Big 12, right there with Iowa State. It's a good place to be right now, heading into March.
A lot of good coaching jobs are getting done in the Big 12 specifically. Bill Self as well doing a really good job, and I'll talk about that a little bit here as well. Now, Greg, as a Kentucky fan, I think the sky is falling right now. It's not great. We're trying to get back on track, but I think this next team we're going to talk about kind of shows that maybe it's the top 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 teams. 6 would be maximum, and then it's everyone else, and everyone else is going to have their ups and their downs this year, their ebbs and their flows. Good offense, bad defense, bad offense, good defense, and that's Wisconsin. Wisconsin loses to Michigan. Michigan was reeling at this point. They were 3-9 after this win. And then we'll just bang out this Sunday game, the Saturday game they had. They lost to Rutgers on the road. Rutgers is another one of these teams in the Big Ten where Rutgers is more excited about next year's basketball season with all their recruits than they are this year's basketball season. Not a good look. It's a lot of disjointed basketball. You watch them play. There's just like turnovers you don't usually see Wisconsin have. It's something that I think they can get corrected. I don't think, the sky is falling as much as like maybe other schools or even like Kentucky and Wisconsin are struggling right now. I think there's potential for them to get it back, but definitely not what you want to see in February.
I think you touched on it. Definitely not what you want to see in February, because if this is a different context, if we were just looking at a straight up 16-8 team that's currently 21 in the net, nice win over Marquette, when they have their 6-5 in Q1, 4-3 in Q2, no losses in Q3 or Q4. That's pretty good. And then you're like, yeah, but they've lost 4 straight, and 2 of those Q2 losses just happened. That Michigan loss may very well turn into a Q3 loss at some point. We'll see about them. The context means everything, and we're talking about the flip flop of some of the other teams we've already talked about today. The NCAA doesn't, unless I'm mistaken, they don't take into account anymore. Your last 10 record or whatever. But when we're looking at brackets, and when we're looking at, who's good, you think about teams that have just gotten hot. I mean, like, think about the UCLA Final Four run. Think about, that's a team. I tell you what, I don't care how well a team plays, for their first whatever games. If they're rolling, mid-February going into early March, that's going to be a team that's hard to pick against. That's your they figured it out candidate. This is like the opposite of that. This is a team that early season seemed to be playing well. We liked the addition of AJ Storr, give this Wisconsin team a little bit of a different dynamic that they've had in the past, but this is weird. So I don't think we have a picked game. Do you have their schedule up? I don't know we're not picking any of their games this week. So I know they don't have anything super important, but I could pull it up if you don't. I'm just curious.
It's against Ohio State and at Iowa.
Yeah, if they lose one or both of those games, we're gonna have real trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue you could say, well, if they split, no, if they lose one or both of those games, it's going to be. I mean, this is a team that was in, as of 2 weeks ago, starting in the 1 seed conversation, and it's just not now. No, absolutely not. They're probably looking more 4, 5, 6 seed. They could finish strong and move back up, but right now they're not playing their best ball, and I guess that's stating the obvious, but not what you want to see late in the season, especially during conference play.
Yeah, I think the good news for these teams, like Wisconsin, like Kentucky, who we'll get to, like even Auburn, who we're going to talk about next, is like you're having some of these losses, and the other teams are having them too. Like, it's not one of those things where it's like the whole top 25 is a bunch of 2 or 3 loss, 4 loss teams. I think there's like 10 5-loss teams in there. There's a couple teams who have more than 5 losses, like Kentucky. It's not the worst thing in the world. We saw a lot of teams last year. We saw UConn last year specifically struggle in the conference play. UConn had 8 losses. They bounced back, got to the 4 seed, ended up going on a run. I think anyone to give up on their team right now would be kind of crazy. You might say, hey, I need to see it before I really pick them in a game, or like I can't trust Wisconsin right now. But to say, hey, the season's over when you have talent like Wisconsin or like Kentucky has, or like Auburn, who we'll talk about in a second here, it's not like, hey, let's throw away the season, let's throw in the towel. Things can happen. It's just conference play is tough. College basketball is different. It's much more skill based, and upsets can happen. So Let's get to Auburn now, Greg. We have Auburn beating Alabama in their first game in the week. We'll talk about their second game later on because it was important to have a little bit more specifics to talk about on that one. But they win 99 to 81 over Alabama, so it's a tale of two different games with these two teams in this rivalry game. One of the ones where you were kind of thinking, hey, maybe we figure Auburn out. They're actually going to be okay. They're going to settle down in the SEC and everything. 6-2 after this game, or 8-2 after this game in conference play. So liked what I saw from them. I like the upside they've shown, but it's far from consistent and far from tested with their schedule they had in the non-conference.
Yeah, this is like it's weird because this team is a lot higher in the net than a team we just talked about, Wisconsin, but they only have two Q1 wins. This Alabama win being, one of them. I do think it's interesting they put up 99 points, 55 in the first half, and they only shot 26% from three. A lot of times when you see a team put up a bunch of points, they were chucking threes. So if anything, Joe, I mean, that's a little – we like to see that. Hey, they can win different ways. These Bruce Pearl teams – often faster pace, chuck a lot of threes. I think of like the Sharif Cooper teams, just from a couple of years ago, and not his team, but the Final Four team and whatnot. He plays a specific way. So when they win a different way, especially, just it's nice to see. 24 from Janai Broome. I mean, when they win a different way, that's a team that you can maybe depend on, but Auburn's had, I hate to say their ups and downs because they only lost 5 times this season, but it still kind of feels like that. I feel like they just go through, they're streaky. Like they've had a couple of like 2 or 3 losses and within a short span, and that just worries you because if you hit that bad streak, March 18th or March 28th, one loss and you're done.
Definitely with that. I'll save what I have more to say about Auburn later on. Alabama's defense needs to do some improvements too. There's a lot of bad defenses this year in college basketball. Let's move on to Thursday, Greg. We have Arizona and Utah. This is one to go back and rewatch if you get a chance. It was a 3 overtime thriller. Arizona ends up winning 105 to 99. They've had their struggles on the road in Pac-12 play. Just games they should win, they just don't end up winning. Utah, a team that we had talked about earlier in the season, still in a good spot to make the tournament out of the Pac-12. But Arizona getting the win and a thriller is basically all I had to say here. They avoided disaster here.
I do have a problem with something you just said. You said this is a game to go back and watch. If you let us know how to watch it, that'd be great. This game was on Pac-12 Network. One of the only benefits of the Pac-12 going away. I can't watch it. There's other podcasts. I am a big fan of Gary Parrish. He always jokes that there's some people that can get Pac-12 Network through a screen on their refrigerator, but they can't actually get it as part of their cable package. Mm-hmm. It's just weird and quirky. So yeah, I mean, this is just one of those weird results. I'm still giving Joe props because this is the Utah team that he's talked about. Will they get in? Won't they get in? I don't know. It's just Pac-12 is maybe somewhere right around where the ACC is. So unfortunately, it's one of the weaker leagues. It's not the SEC, not the Big 12, not the Big 10. We'll just have to see, if we're going to get a 2, 3, 4 bid Pac-12. It's going to kind of depend on how things shake out. In terms of this game, wild one. You almost, you could say something about the defense, but it's a game that went in triple overtime. So, 105 in triple overtime actually isn't terrible. So this is maybe the opposite effect of what we just talked about. But any game that you went in triple overtime, double overtime, whatever, that's always you always take that as a double plus because it's one of those results that could have gone either way. And this Arizona team that we know has had some slides lately, maybe within the last couple of weeks. This is a game that I'm sure they're glad didn't go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, it starts creeping in the doubt if you lose this game. Utah still probably on the good side of the bubble, but a lot remains to be decided here in the last month of the season. The other game on Thursday we have to talk about, UAB beats Florida Atlantic. We had mentioned Florida Atlantic playing with fire several times. They almost lost again on Sunday to Wichita State. So they lose this game. It is a quad 2 loss. UAB, it was on the road and everything. Andy Kennedy's done a good job with this program. The 7-3 in conference. The AAC has team. They're not going to get more than 2 teams in at most, but they have some teams that can pull off some upsets, and that scares me. You look at Florida Atlantic's resume, probably going to make the tournament, but if you start dropping some of these games, it's again, you just never want to get close to having, more than 6 or 7 losses in some of these leagues that aren't the best.
Yeah, it's their big good wins that are holding their resume up because they're still sitting at 26th in the net. The Arizona win's really nice. The Texas A&M win, luckily, we'll talk about that in a little bit. They're starting to, piece things together again now that they're healthy. But they're kind of benefiting from some funny math where that UAB loss is like it's barely a Q. I won't say barely, but it's 15, 20 slots from being Q3. That Bryant loss that they had early in the year was a Q4. Now it's a Q3. They still have the Florida Gulf Coast loss. I don't know. It's just weird to see this from a team that is full of older guys, returned basically everyone. Coach is the same. The only difference is the league, but they lost those games out of conference too. Those stinkers to Gulf Coast and Bryant. It's just odd. I mean, it's just. I think it's just a testament to how quirky the sport is this year. And this is not like unique to them. Like, yeah, they're in a unique situation where they brought basically the entire team back. The only other team off the top of my head that brought basically everybody back and maybe added a piece is Purdue. That added Lance Jones and then basically brought everybody else back. But it's just it's odd, it's quirky, but so is the entire sport this year.
Yeah, it's weird that they mentioned like it's tough to get up for some of these road games they're playing, like against like teams in the new conference when it's at least it's a new arena, it's a new like opponent. You should be able to get up for that easier than if you went back to the same conference and same teams. I don't really understand that very much. I do think partially it's quirkiness, but the hope is that like, hey, they're getting bored with playing against these teams they should be, and they're kind of messing around. When it gets to tournament time, you're gonna hope they turn it on, but it's not that easy. Like some teams can do it, some teams can't, and I'd say a lot of teams can't. So have to keep on watching them, make sure they finish strong to make the tournament. Obviously, Memphis falling down the rankings has hurt them as well. Their chances down the stretch is not going to be as good as they were before. Greg, we already mentioned Nevada and their game on Friday, so let's move on to Saturday. Let's talk about Illinois and Michigan State. This game was honestly, with a couple minutes left in the game, it looked like Illinois was going to win this one. Michigan State stays strong, gets the win. Now, we had mentioned we didn't like all the talk about Michigan State getting ranked earlier in the year because they were like 12-9 a couple days ago, a week or so ago. But they're playing themselves into good position here to go on a run, especially because the schedule is not very tough the next couple games. The Big Ten and the whispers here, the Big Ten, not very good.
Yeah, I was looking to see if I could find like the win probability. And I think at one point it was like 80. Yeah, at the peak coming down late in the second half when it was an 8-point game. So the game flipped from Illinois up 8 to losing by 8. It was 72-64. Illinois has an 85% win probability. That's with that just at the under 8. So that's the under 8 timeout. I mean, that we've seen more epic collapses, but from a team that, now has got their star player back, like this is another weird result until you look at who's on the other side. And like, Joe, maybe we should have just seen this coming, that he's going to put something together and they're going to be a 10 seed and they'll end up in the Elite 8. And we'll be like, how did we not see this coming? It's still, this Michigan State team is still, I don't know if one dimensional is the, I just feel like they go as far as, Tyson Walker takes them. Maybe not necessarily in this game, but sorry, just had an ad pop up, so it put noise in my ears. Very difficult to talk while I'm doing that. I think we said the same thing. Is where is that secondary scoring coming from? Xavier Booker is still like, I think there's like an APB out there for him. I don't know what happened to him because that was one of the guys we talked about in the preseason. So, but they get a big comeback win, and all of a sudden, I thought I had their net here. I printed stuff out so I could do a better job of actually listening to Joe this week and not repeating things that he had just said. The Baylor win is still their best win. This is by far their second best win. And if you want to take a guess what their third best win is, we've talked about it. This team just entered the top 25 this week to this afternoon. They played them in a championship a couple years ago. You know what I'm talking about? No, I'm sorry,
Uh,
not a couple years ago. Many decades ago, they played them in a championship game. That's
uh,
their third best win.
Indiana State, and then
That is that is their third best win according to the net.
so, and then Butler would be the next one probably. So
Yes, that is a Q2 right now. So it's not the strongest resume. It's not how we thought this team would get here, but they are sitting at 23rd in the net. They don't have any like terrible losses because James Madison, though they kind of fell off our radar, they've stayed afloat. They're sitting at 55. I actually went and checked Seth Davis's AP poll this afternoon. I was curious. Michigan State did receive 17 votes. He was not one. He was not one
good.
of them. But I was genuinely curious. I was really curious. So I went and looked, because if you don't know this, you can go to the AP website. You can look at the poll, and then there's a drop down box. You can actually go look at the individual voter. So I didn't take the time to look at who voted for who, but I was curious about him because he's been that, he's been that Michigan State stand for a while. Joe, I feel like I say this about 25, 30 teams. And this is what I want to bring up a point that you and I talked about off air, because I think it kind of speaks to this. You said to me when we were talking this weekend that you think, and I don't, if I want to paraphrase for you, but if you want to expand on this, because I think this game and this team speaks to that. The gap between like teams, the fifth best team in the country and the sixth best team in the country is probably about as big as the gap between like the sixth best team in the country and like the 50th best team in the country. There's just a big log jam at the front. You want to, I don't want to speak for you, but I wanted to make, because I thought that was something important. So I wanted to give you a chance to go ahead, and because I think that's an important point, and it kind of speaks to this game and Michigan State as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, just look at some of the teams that we're talking about. There's probably 3 or 4 front runners to win it all. Probably 5. Houston, Kansas, UConn, UNC, even with some of their losses, that like Georgia Tech and everything, and Clemson, and Purdue. But Tennessee has 6 losses. Marquette's had some head scratchers. Tyler Kolek's played bad. Arizona has some of those head scratching losses. Duke, we've had issues with them where they fell down and they're trying to move their way back up, and they've had some losses. So it's a big drop off, I think, and it is really weird. I think honestly, games on the road are huge in that, and just teams who can handle the road environments are doing okay. Teams who can't are doing not okay sometimes. So it makes you wonder if this whole craziness of the season is going to end up being like, hey, all the 4-1 seeds in March go to the Final Four, because we just don't want to see that all the time. But I do think there'll be at least a fun storylines if that does happen, because all these other teams will create some really good games. Now, for a point of reference for Michigan State, they have won 1 Big Ten road game this year. It was against Maryland. They've lost to Wisconsin 2 times. They've lost to Minnesota. They've lost to Illinois. They lost to Northwestern. They lost to Nebraska. All on the road, other than the one loss that was Wisconsin that was at home. That's crazy. So I know I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the podcast, they'll end up being like 16-10, and we'll have to worry about whether they're like in the tournament again or like whether they're good. I don't know. The Big Ten's just bad. It makes it tough to read. Now, their next 4 games, at Penn State, at Michigan, versus Iowa, versus Ohio State. Those should be 4 easy wins if this team is good enough to make the tournament. Maybe you lose one just because that's how college basketball is, but it's crazy that the Big Ten is down and Michigan State can't take advantage. Like, yeah, there's Purdue, there's Illinois, Wisconsin had a hot streak, but I'm kind of flabbergasted. So hopefully they can get a win on the road here against some of these bottom feeders. They still have Purdue and Northwestern on the schedule later, but yeah, this could be a team in 2 weeks, Greg, after these 4 games where they're 19-9 and we're like, oh, okay, and people start drinking the Kool-Aid, and it's like, maybe they shouldn't be, because you're right. The resume has some good wins, but it's got some question marks too. All right, let's get to the next game. We have Auburn and Florida. Greg, this is one we didn't necessarily expect. Florida wins 81-65. Now, Florida has played their way into the tournament. They arguably should have been ranked this week, playing very good basketball. Walter Clayton, the Iona transfers, had 20 points in this one. And something to note, after Auburn loses this game, Bruce Pearl said, my team can't beat Kentucky next Saturday. Even with Kentucky struggling, my team can't beat them. I don't know if it's a motivational thing. I don't know if he actually believes it because it's just the way they're playing. I don't know if he knows that, like, hey, the non-conference schedule just sucked, and people are figuring us out. I don't know what it is. That was a weird comment from Bruce Pearl, but give the credit for Florida for getting the win and putting themselves in very good position.
So I don't know if this is a like a coach philosophy thing, but I did hear that he was getting interviewed post game after Bama Auburn, and he said he was worried about Florida. So maybe it's like one of those things where he wants his teams to feel like the underdog, and they played like the underdog in this game in particular. But that Auburn Kentucky game is one of the games we're picking. I'm really excited for it. I think Tennessee Kentucky was a game I was more excited for, but man, this one's right up there because these are two teams that I love. I don't care what the national consensus on both of these teams are. I love them both. This game, when I started seeing Twitter pictures of the score, and I was like, I have no idea what to think of this. And they were able to close the gap a little bit, but this game was, it was never close. I think it was like 70-38 at one point. I mean, it was just never close. So this Florida resume, it's now got the Auburn win, it's got the Kentucky win, but that's really it for their good wins, but no losses outside of Q1. I mean, that's pretty strong. I can't think of hardly any teams that we can say that about. Even look at, I'm sure because Purdue's loss to Northwestern was at home. That's probably a Q2, right? So you can hardly say that about anyone. That's pretty darn strong. And this is a team we talked about them a little bit when they beat Kentucky, but like just I think I texted you a week or two ago and I said, are they good? And you were like, well, define that. What does that mean? And I think now we're like, all right, now we gotta pay attention to them. So, Todd Golden in his second year out there, I think. Joe knows I love that San Francisco team with Khalil Shabazz, and there was quite a few players on that San Francisco team from a couple years ago when he was out there. So I would say no surprise that he's doing good things at Florida. Got a lot more resources. Maybe didn't think he would have them going this quick, and especially this season in a wide open SEC. Didn't think they'd be competing, but they're 6-4 in the SEC, so they're not necessarily competing for an SEC championship. But I didn't think they'd be a player, in the SEC. I think when we talked preseason, we maybe mentioned 4 teams, between Auburn, Texas A&M, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Those were probably the 4. I don't think either of us had, Florida as a team, and even probably would have mentioned Bama before Florida, but Florida looks like they're going to be. I don't know. We're if you're seeing them as a, they end up in an 8-9 game. I mean, this is not a team you're picking to beat one of the 1 seeds, right? I mean, especially with how good the 1 seeds are probably going to be in comparison to everybody else.
It's something to consider because they do have some shooters and they rebound ridiculously well. I think they're one of the best rebounding teams in the country. So it's something to consider. I would probably stay away from it because I don't know if they have the firepower overall. It's going to take Walter Clayton playing out of his mind, but it's definitely something to consider with that rebounding. I will say, Greg, teams, I think there's 5 other teams that don't have a loss in quad 2, 3, or 4. I won't ask you that because it's bad radio here to do a trivia question we'll be thinking. But Houston, Purdue, Dayton, San Diego State, and Indiana State. All those teams, tournament ended today, would be in the tournament.
The 2 that interest me there, Purdue, because I would have thought that Northwestern loss would have been Q2. But where's North? Are you still looking at it? Where's Northwestern in the net right now?
I can look that up in a second while you think, but yeah.
So that means they've got to be 30 or better because that was at Purdue. The Dayton one surprises me as well, although the most recent loss, the VCU loss, was on the road. So I guess that's where that comes from.
Northwestern was on the road, and that's why it's
okay. I thought
they beat him.
I thought the Northwestern loss was okay
because they had Chris Collins going nuts and on Purdue. So yeah,
the Dayton really surprises me because I feel like of the losses they've had, some of them have been just weird. But I guess the Nets are just good enough that it's not that. So
yeah. All right, so let's get to the game I don't want to talk about. We have Gonzaga beating Kentucky 89-85. It was a good offensive game plan by Mark Few. It was bad defense by Kentucky, which we saw again. They at one point ran the same play 12 times in a row. That was all over Kentucky Twitter. It was a mid ball screen. They had Graham Ike go to the block, and every single time he either got really good position down low, or he just was wide open for an easy basket on a pass. That's something that needs to be fixed. Kentucky was down by 10 at halftime, and they came back pretty well. It looked like for a while there they might win this game just based on their offense, but that defense really needs to be fixed. For Gonzaga, big win for them. We talked about not having a quad one win. This is something that puts them back into maybe getting an at-large bid. Now, Greg, you had mentioned even before they were like in the same range as like a 33, I think, where like the lowest net team ever to make the tournament to miss the tournament was. They're up to 24 now, so it would take a disaster to kind of get to that range where hey, they're getting in unless something unprecedented happens.
Yeah, I mean, unless they lose like one or two of their regular season WCC games, they're going to be in that. And we've already talked about this. The WCC until next year has that. Basically, them and St. Mary's will be into the automatically into the semifinals. So as long as they don't take any bad losses the remainder of the WCC season, they're really not going to have something that could knock them back that far in the net. This is their only Q1. This is their only Q1 win at the moment. So it's on the road, so it's not going to turn into anything else. 5 players in double figures, 9 assists from Nemhard. He's one of the only main contributors that did not hit double figures. No points from Dusty Stromer. They've played around with like their 7th guy quite a bit this year. It was the VO kid at one point. I'm not going to try and I'll say it. It's the Kranjovic kid, however you say his name. Man, like the teams we like to see are the ones like we just talked about. You got 6, 7, 8, 9 solid options. And then Kansas seems like they've, not to get on a tangent about them, they've maybe developed 1 or 2 more options than what we were talking about them, a couple weeks ago. But this is probably why Gonzaga is where they are, is because it's like 6 dudes. And yeah, those 6 guys are talented enough to win a couple games in the NCAA tournament. But boy, you better hope they are all on, because if they're not, I mean, it took 90 points to win this game against, a Kentucky team that regularly scores 90 points. So, honestly, that's a decent defensive effort from them as well. But I would argue they needed this win more than Kentucky. Of course, the Kentucky situation is odd just because of the recent losses that they've taken. But I know you said, of course, if they, continue playing bad, lose several more games, they could end up out of the tournament. You said, I think they're probably at a 6 or a 7 seed right now. Well, I believe the last time they went to the title game, they were a 7 seed or an 8 seed. So that's not exactly the worst territory for them to be in. It was the UConn. It was the UConn national. I can't remember. Was a 7. Yeah. It was a 7-8. Right? Okay. Yeah. So I mean, they just got to figure out the rotation. They got to figure out defense. But I don't think they need. Have you looked at today to see where they are? I mean, they were like 102. I would imagine they backed up even more after that.
I don't know what their number is now, but I know since January 12th they are 235 in defensive efficiency.
That is
so. Here's the thing: they got all these 7-footers into the lineup, and everyone was, rim protection. They're 7-footers. They're not protecting the rim. I mean, Ugo Onyenso is doing a little bit, but he's limited in how he can move. It's kind of like the Zach Edey thing we talked about last year, where his defense wasn't always that greatest because they moved him out on the perimeter. Now it's a lot better because of his mobility. There's a world where the rotation gets shortened and they have 2 7-footers on the bench who don't even play that much anymore. It's just, if you're not going to play defense as a 7-footer, then go try to score as many points as possible. The rotations have been, at times, Calipari gets criticized for having lineups that play just 3 minutes and they get taken off the floor. And then this game he's getting criticized second half because he left a unit together that was playing so well to make them come back, left them on the floor, and didn't put Rob Dillingham in because Rob Dillingham only played 4 minutes. So it's kind of this catch-22. Like, yeah, they put Rob in and things didn't go as well as the first 5, so he put the first 5 back in and they still played decent. It's tough, man. I think they're going to need, like I mentioned a couple podcasts ago, they're going to need Justin Edwards, Adu Thiero to step up and just be like, we're the defensive guys. We need to stop this. Antonio Reeves has already improved as a defender, but still not that great. It's getting to the point where you might consider throwing in a zone, and if you throw in a zone this late in the season, something's wrong. One, and two, it's not going to work that well because you haven't practiced it. So there's a lot to change here, and maybe just going small. If you're not rebounding well, and if you're not defending well with the 7-footers in, guess what? They're on the bench. That's what you said. That's what John Calipari said. Is like, hey, we're not gonna mess around. If you don't play defense, you're not gonna play. As enticing as maybe Big Z has been, yeah, that's gonna be that's just not gonna work if you don't play defense. So
I still love this team. You cannot get me to quit them. I
yeah.
just I don't want to give away my pick before we talk about it, but I already saw it because Joe and I have a little document. I saw who you picked. We can talk about that in a little bit, but you just cannot get me to quit this team. It's the depth, it's the options. We've historically seen teams that are this bad at defense. They just suffer in March, but something about them, man. I know I already made the comparison once, but it just reminds me of not. It's completely different types of players, but the Iowa teams with Luka Garza that were like 5th in the country in adjusted offense and like 101st in defense. But for some reason, I like this team more.
I think they're more like Miami. I said that last time too, but they're more like Miami from last year, where they don't play defense and they have tons of guards who can play well. But I will say there is reason for hope. There really is. I mean, if you look at some of their losses, 3 of their losses have been without DJ Wagner. The 4th loss without DJ Wagner was he was coming back from injury against Gonzaga. There are a lot of moving pieces being put together. The defense hasn't been good, but we know they can play better. There's things you can look at and think, hey, this team can get better. So Greg needs to grab his charger. I'm going to quickly recap Baylor and Kansas while he does that and talk about my thoughts from the game. Hopefully he gets back to give his thoughts as well. Kansas wins this one 64-61. Now, this was a good win for them in the fact that they had Kevin McCullar out in this game. He said he was kind of banged up on College game day. That's how it came about, that he was going to miss this game. And they showed they can win without him, which was huge. It was more balanced scoring. Dickinson led the way with 15 points. You had DeJuan Harris with 14, KJ Adams with 13, Furphy with 11, and then you got Elmarco Jackson and Nick Timberlake. Timberlake had 8. Elmarco Jackson had just 1, but he played a lot of minutes. So you love to see that balance from Kansas. And for Baylor, Misi played well, 21 points. Walter played well with 17, but really didn't get much out of the other guys. So I'm not out on Baylor for losing this one. I am probably more in on Kansas as a result of this game, winning without McCullar and mixing up the lineup, getting guys from key minutes like Timberlake, who did score 8 points. It was 2 of 7 shooting. 3 of 8 from the floor, 2 of 7 from 3. But I think showing that you can win with this team, and then when you get McCullar back healthy, you have some extra options, guys who've played more important minutes. That's going to be more for them down the stretch.
Yeah, you said the one thing that I wanted to mention in this game, a team that we've talked about just not having a lot of depth and only having so many options, winning without, one of their top 3 scorers, really one of their top 2 scorers, Kevin McCullar, is really good for them. They're going to have to, I did see they're going to be without him again tonight. They're playing Texas Tech. We'll pick that game in a few minutes. Just if they continue to do this and, maybe this is one of those, blessing in disguise kind of things where Timberlake develops a little more and Furphy's, he had a little bit of an off game, but maybe he develops a little bit more and it could just be good for them. And that's a team that, looks like if they become more well-rounded, they're going to be one of those 1 or 2 seeds that looks like, they might be, for lack of a better term, the juggernaut of this year. Now, I don't think they'd be a juggernaut in other years. If you took this team and picked them and planted them, 2-3 years ago, I'm not sure how they'd fare. I'm not sure how any of these teams would fare. It's just with how wild this year is, it makes me think that, if we put them up against some of the better teams of last year's, they probably wouldn't do so well, but this is good for them. So, yeah, that was the only point, and I did over here. You mentioned it, so that's. But the other note is tonight, no McCullar. So
we'll pick that game later. We have Tennessee at Texas A&M. Texas A&M kills them, showing what they can do with a fully healthy team. They've mixed up their rotation a little bit, but we know that Radford and Wade Taylor are the stars here. Radford had 27 points. Tough to win on the road in the SEC, so Tennessee does have the 6 losses. I mentioned they are not in the group of the top 5 contenders we talked about, but they're probably maybe the best of the rest, or up near the best of the rest. Just a tough thing to go beat Texas A&M with those guards. And Texas A&M, they have the injuries earlier in the year. This win gets them really close to being like, okay, we feel good. We feel like we're going to be in the tournament. Not that you take your foot off the gas, but just, hey, we finally got things stabilized to a point where it's not like we're fearing we have to win every single game.
Yeah, we don't want this team to take their foot off the gas. This is one of those teams that I've kind of already said, for lack of a better term, like rooting for them. It's a team I want to see in March because I think they're fun to see in March. You kind of mentioned how the rotation's a little bit different. Henry Coleman was a pretty big piece early on. They only got 2 points from him out of 17 minutes this game, and they still throttled Tennessee. So maybe he's one of those pieces that he has a game here or there. He was definitely a more important factor earlier. So basically, we know what he is capable of. Now, he may not give that every game right now. Maybe he's been in and out with injuries, so maybe he's still struggling with something, or maybe what we saw earlier in the year is like his peak of peaks, and he's just not going to give that every game. Just good to know that this team is, like you said, they're coming together. They're getting those wins, but definitely don't want them to take their foot off the gas because I want to see this team in March. We got to see this team personally, and before they've kind of hit their peak. This is easily their best win. Not so worried about this for Tennessee. This is just life on the road in a good conference.
Yep, excited to see what Texas A&M can do with this healthy roster moving forward. And as you said, Coleman only played 17 minutes. That would have been crazy talk at the start of the year. That's just how things are going for them. They switched it up, and things are working. So UNLV beats New Mexico. We'll go over this one quickly because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Just another upset this college basketball season. But New Mexico right now, 19-5, 7-4 in conference. It's low to the Mountain West. You're going to take some losses. You don't want to lose at home, but they drop out of the top 25. I mean, oh darn, you're still a very good team.
Yeah, this is just weird because UNLV's picked off a couple of teams in the Mountain West this year, and the Mountain West has just had some weird results. But UNLV's now picked off. They picked off New Mexico twice. Or I'm sorry, yeah, they've picked off New Mexico twice now. They picked them off home and on the road. They picked off Boise State, who you and I both think probably going to be one of those tournament teams, and they actually beat Creighton earlier in the year. I completely forgot about that. That was in December. So just an odd team. There's some talent on this team. Juan Kruger-San is the coach. They have a couple of good recruits. They're probably a couple of years away from being anything. Of course, I say that, and they'll get a bunch of guys in transfer portal, and they'll be a top 10 team next year just because I said that. But It's just weird. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about this. This New Mexico team is still good. Don't like seeing that loss at home, like you said, but you can take one every couple of. This is probably what do you think? This is probably gonna be what you think, a 6 or a 7 seed. Maybe. I mean, could they back up to an 8 or a 9? I mean, where do you have them in your latest bracketology?
Well, that'll be out on Wednesday, so check out for that then. But it's probably going to be around that 7-ish range for now. We'll see how the bracket crunches out when we get to it. And thank God that UNLV Dayton game got canceled. Otherwise, you'd be a sad boy when UNLV ended up beating Dayton this year. So let's go Boise State and Utah State. My Boise boys got beat by 19. It was bad. The good news for Boise and the Mountain West, I think, is that the two teams I expected to kind of fall off just because their non-conference schedules were bad were Utah State and Nevada. Utah State now gets this win. They're 20-4, 8-3 in the Mountain West. Resume looks pretty good. The net looks pretty good. So the bad non-conference schedule maybe not going to bite them. Boise, on their hand, still has all these quad one wins that even like the Kentuckys and the Illinois that we talk about don't have. So Boise's still in a very good spot. Utah State has held that spot, which I just didn't think was going to happen.
Yeah, you need to explain to me how a team that is 5-6 in Q1 and 2-1 in Q2 is 49th in the net, because I just don't get that. Yeah, they have a Q3 loss to UNLV, but some of this funny math, man, it just doesn't make sense. Now, what we learned from this game is that I am an idiot, because what did I say last week? I said we were talking about the Nevada Utah State game, and I said you don't want to lose this one, because then you're gonna put yourself in a situation where you have to win against Boise. What did they do? They lost to Nevada, and then they beat Boise. So just don't listen to anything I say because apparently I don't know what I'm talking about. I would argue that's probably the better win for Utah State to get, regardless of what Nevada looks like. I think Boise State's probably the tougher team. I haven't looked at strength of record for any of these teams. It's something I need to look at. But I still think this is they got of the two games they played last week, they got the better win, and they are currently sitting at I think it was 28th in the net. I just had it. 28th in the net. It's just weird because they have significantly less good wins than Boise, but Utah State's way ahead of them in the net. I don't know, man. It's just release the formula, release the tapes, but whatever.
Yeah. Lots that remains unanswered from the net. Let's go to Sunday for the last game that we're going to recap, Greg. We have Villanova winning 80-54. They're 13-11 on the season. They're trying to play their way back into bubble talk. Justin Moore returning from his injury and kind of recovering as he plays is going to be key here as they go down the stretch. He just has not looked healthy since he had surgery. And Seton Hall taking this loss, I mean, it just makes you wonder if they can fall even further. Not a team we expected to be very good this year, but then they outperformed expectations early. So two teams who are desperate in the Big East. There's probably about 4 or 5 teams in the Big East that are just desperate for some wins, including these teams, Xavier, Butler, a bunch of teams out, St. John's as well, who are just need to get wins. The bubble is going to not be friendly to a couple of them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this just because one of the margin, 26 point margin, and two, this just the Seton Hall aspect. This is a team that, they beat UConn earlier in the year, and, we started looking at them and we're like, oh, are they good? Are they good? And, we both kind of been out on this Villanova team for a while, except for when yours truly picked them in their MTE, because I just know when to pick them apparently. But it's just weird. You start to think like, are they going to fall out of I mean, they're in the Big East, so they're going to have opportunities, but like this kind of result, yeah, okay, it's on the road, but these are the things that we look at and we're like, what does this team have? They lost to Villanova on the road by a ton. You got to pick one of these. So you got to pick one of these two teams. I say today, Joe, you got to pick one of these two teams. One of them's going to make the tournament. You got to, bet $100 on it. Only one of them's going to make it. Which one are you picking?
Seton Hall.
That's where I'd pick, and it's weird. This game is way off the rocker for that, but I'm still there. I just can't get in line with this Villanova team yet.
Nope. Even if Justin Moore returns and recovers, Kyle Neptune can't be trusted. 1 and 2, Seton Hall still has a good body of work. I mean, it's not like it's one. This is one game, and I don't think that means anything. They do need to turn it on here in a little bit and get things going. All right, Greg, we have to mention Virginia. Virginia has been a team that we had said we were out on, but they're 10-3. They're second in the ACC right now, 19-5 record. Now, the thing I'll say, Greg, before I'll let you get into what you're going to say is the ACC is bad, and I can't tell if they're on a pretty long win streak right now. At 7, I think it's 8 games. I'm not sure how many of the wins are even good. So I guess good for them. I'm still not picking them. I still don't believe in them. I think the defense is cool, and Ryan Dunn might be the best perimeter defender in the country, but I don't believe in him. I don't know. Same thing for me.
So they cracked the AP poll this week. I think 21 in the AP poll. It would be very odd to, especially this late in the season. I think it would be very odd to see a team ranked this late in the AP poll not make the tournament. But I think you're right. I think the ACC is bad enough that their losses are out there. I don't know if you have their schedule up, but depending on who they're playing, the losses are out there that could knock them straight the way out. The problem is, I don't know, not the problem is, but they really haven't taken any bad losses outside of the Notre Dame loss, which that team just pray for them, man. I hope Shrewsbury has some good years ahead of him, but it's not looking good right now. But they got a couple wins that they're hanging on to. They're really happy that Clemson's coming along well. They got that win that was on the road and a neutral against Florida, which obviously is aging really well. And we forget they also beat Texas A&M pretty badly, and that was one that they beat them. I think this is where things get hazy for me now. I believe they played them when they were missing one or a couple of guys, so they just kind of got the luck of the draw on that. I still don't trust this team. I don't care if they're ranked. it's almost like I put them in that, and I know you like them more than I do, in that like Oklahoma BYU kind of phase where I'm like, I just like they weren't supposed to be good. Yeah, okay, they're kind of putting some wins together, but you're right, it's the ACC, so like, how much can they be trusted?
Got some decent wins. Just don't know how much they can really be, as you said, trusted. They got Pitt, Wake Forest, at Virginia Tech, North Carolina, at Boston College, at Duke, and versus Georgia Tech. I mean, that's probably 3 losses in there. Probably. I mean, that's still like, hey, they're going to make the tournament, but I still don't think that their body of work merits anything. They have some losses that make you scratch your head. At least Memphis, in hindsight, Notre Dame is like one of the worst losses you can have. I know we said this basketball season is crazy, but that's really
That's
bad.
bad.
That's really
That's
bad.
bad.
So I'm pretty far out on them. I could they mess up an ACC team? Could they mess up Duke and like win a game because of their defense? Sure. Could they win a couple games in the ACC tournament? Sure. Could they win an NCAA tournament game just because their defense is great? That's awesome. But I don't know. It'd be really fun to see a Kentucky like Virginia 7-10 matchup. That'd be fun. All right, so that is our worth mentioning. Let's get to our picks for the week. As mentioned, the first one we're going to pick Kansas and Texas Tech. This is at Texas Tech. Greg mentioned McCullough is out for this game. Greg, who are you going with?
Still taking Kansas. They already showed us that they can win a game without him. I would argue they won they won a game against a better team without him. So I'll take Kansas, even though it's on the road, Joe. Top 10 team on the road against now. So here's the key. Texas Tech dropped out of they dropped out of top 25. So now this is top 10 team going on the road against unranked. So now we've got that it's is it still less than 50%? I don't know if you're checking out. I think it was.
Yep.
Is it the KSR guy was the one that was it Matt Jones, or I can't remember, was he the one that originally put that stat together, or
I don't
I think
know.
I think it was the guy from KSR.
I don't know. Everyone's been posting about it since. I think Fox put it up there the last week, and they were 40% on the top 10 teams against unranked teams on the road. I'm gonna take Texas Tech. I think the crowd would have been even more electric if McCullough played, seeing that he played at Texas Tech. But that crowd is crazy. They have lost some home games this year. Cincinnati mainly. I think Cincinnati might be the only one because the Villanova loss was part of the Atlantis thing. But I think they protect their home court. I like that they have different guys who can handle the ball with Toussaint and Pop Isaacs. I'll say they win the game. If McCullough was going to play, I would take him. But it's cool that Kansas did that. It was at home. How much can you count on these guys? I do really like Furphy. He is rising up mock drafts as we speak. As a freshman that tall who could shoot. A
freshman that reclassified, mind you.
True. And DeJuan Harris, how much is he going to score? So I'll go Texas Tech. If Kansas wins, I won't be too surprised. But when you only have 5 guys, like, hey, what happens if Hunter Dickinson gets in trouble? Get foul trouble? Like, yeah, KJ Adams slides up. Parker Braun plays more minutes. And I don't know. I just think there's so many ways you can lose if you're at this point on the road. So I'm going to go Texas Tech. Let's go up next with the Ole Miss Kentucky game. This one is on Tuesday, 9 p.m. at Rupp, Greg.
Yeah, so I have this. This is probably a game that, if Kentucky hadn't just lost their last game, because Ole Miss has been they flirted with the top 25, been in the very back end. I'm picking Kentucky. If Kentucky hadn't just lost to Gonzaga, I probably wouldn't have put this on our slate. I just coming off a loss at home. They've got that. Is it 4 losses in a row at home for Kentucky now? It was 3 or 4. I can't remember what the exact number is, but
yeah. It's 3.
So this is another home game. I don't know. I don't think Ole Miss is any good. I don't care. We've looked at the resume. We don't need to rehash. Like 75% of their games were in Q4. So I think Kentucky wins this game. But Kentucky Twitter would be on fire if they lost this game. I mean, on fire.
I mean, the last thing you want to do when your defense is playing this bad is play a Chris Beard coach team who is going to bring the defense. Is going to bring the intensity. That is scary. I'm going Kentucky, and I think mostly it's because I kind of like Ole Miss, but at the same time, I hate when teams don't schedule tough out of conference. I think it's coward. I think it's probably trying to manipulate the net, or you're trying to say, hey, our team's not good enough to make it this year. Let's get some wins on the schedule to make us look better as a coach or whatever. It is bad. Their schedule's bad. And I think that lack of big game experience, even though they've gotten some in the SEC, even though they've lost the last two, I think that it sticks. I said it with Nevada. I said it with Utah State. I'll keep it consistent for the big conference teams too. You need to play someone out of conference. Sure, they played Memphis. That's awesome. Memphis is nowhere near as good anymore. I guess you get credit for trying. They played NC State. NC State was like not going to be a tournament team coming into the season anyway, so you knew what you were doing there. Cal, everyone knew what Cal was going to be. So I'm going to say Kentucky wins. I think they'll shorten their rotation. I think DJ Wagner being healthier and healthier is going to help them moving forward. I think they might split this week, and if you're going to say they're going to split this week, I'll take them in this game, and we'll talk about the next game in a little bit here. All right, Oklahoma and Baylor is also that night. That is 9 p.m. at Baylor.
Yeah, our favorite camera angle, Joe's. I'm gonna take Baylor. I just have not been high on Oklahoma. I like the way we've seen several contributors from Baylor on offense lately. Wish they would shore up that defense a little bit, but I will take Baylor at home.
Yeah, I do like Oklahoma more than I think the consensus is right now, but I think Baylor at home is too much. Baylor is a team I like a lot more. I think Oklahoma could be a good team too. It just shows you how deep the Big 12 is. Unfortunately, it's going to be a week where Oklahoma ends up falling back out of the top 25 because they also play Kansas this week, so they'll have to get back on track in the future weeks. We'll go to Wednesday now. We have South Carolina and Auburn. Big games all around in the SEC this week. South Carolina moving up the AP poll all the way up to 11. Only 3 losses on the season. Pretty good season still.
I just keep looking at the South Carolina roster and like, yeah, they have Michi Johnson and I'm just not in love with it. Like, I know they've got some great wins, but they just don't have that dude for me. Like, even Michi Johnson has been like under 10 points. I think like 2 out of the last 3 games. So I'm going Auburn. I did have South Carolina on my radar probably earlier than Joe said I should have, but it's weird because now I'm like I don't know what to think. Like seeing the top 15 number next to them or whatever I don't have it in front of me of what it is today. It's just it doesn't hit me right. I don't think they're that good, but maybe this is just the way this year works.
Well, I mean, at least they've earned it a little bit with the Kentucky and Tennessee wins. I'm going to go South Carolina in this one. I do like what Lamont Paris has done this year. I do think that they have enough to get stuff done here. Taylon Cooper is also very good, not just Michi Johnson. Yes, I may have said you brought them up a little bit too early, but we had talked about teams who aren't very good too, and I just, it's unique. It's unique that we see teams like this do this, so it's cool that you called it out. For this game specifically, Auburn got that win against Alabama. They had beaten Ole Miss recently 2 times, but I'm still questioning how good this team is, and I think I like South Carolina just better overall. And that's crazy to say with the amount of talent Auburn has, but if you have your coach saying after the game that, hey, I don't know if we can beat Kentucky next Saturday, you still have South Carolina on the schedule. Bruce, let's focus on the first game first, all right? So crazy that we're jumping ahead here and coach talk wasn't being had, but let's just go move ourselves ahead to Saturday now, Greg. We have Texas A&M and Alabama in the first one, another good SEC matchup.
Everything probably points to Bama, but Texas A&M is like one of those 5 teams that I just can't quit, and like 3 or 4 of them happen to be in the SEC. Now that they're rolling, I just think they're starting to put a resume together. Bama's a great team. That's one thing I did forget to mention when we were talking Bama Auburn is like at least Bama's like made sense of that high net ranking. Like they put together a couple of nice wins and like it actually looks like they've earned it a little bit. So want to give them some credit because early in the year they're like sitting at 10-6 or something and ranked 8th in the net. And I'm like, this makes no sense. But I'm gonna pick A&M, and maybe it's just a gut feeling, but I'll pick A&M on the road.
All right, I thought about Texas A&M, not gonna lie, but I want Alabama. I'm gonna mind you, when I did my All-American teams this preseason, Greg was like, Wade Taylor's an All-American. College basketball talent sucks this year. So now he's all in on Texas A&M. Here we go. That's how it goes. I'm going to go Alabama. I think it's just tough to win on the road. I still think there's, like, it just feels like something else is going on. Texas A&M, Henry Coleman playing 17 minutes, like coming off the bench now, just doesn't seem right or real after how the season started. I do think it's going to be tough for Alabama because they don't play defense themselves, and these two guards can take advantage. But I do like Mark Sears. I do like having Grant Nelson at the five. Um, I think they can protect their home court, and Texas A&M, I think with Villa playing well last week, I think has a good spot here. You can lose this game and still feel okay.
I do owe Wade Taylor a public apology, so this is the forum in which I
Okay.
will do it. I am sorry.
Yeah, well, Greg, you know what? I'm gonna be nice since I've busted your chops a couple times. You did call Mountain West maybe getting more than 3 or 4 teams. That looks good right now. Right now, it looks good. We'll see. Next week it could change because, God, I thought last week was 3 to 4 teams. All right, let's go to the next pick here. We have Marquette and UConn. This is probably the best game of the weekend, Greg. Big East battle here, 3 p.m. Eastern, and this one's at UConn.
Taking UConn. They're one of those teams you can count on. We've already talked about how Marquette's been up and down. I'll take UConn. Enough said.
I'm taking UConn. That's pretty much the same answer. I mean, Tyler Killick's had his ups and downs this year. UConn's really coming together. I think they can beat you in multiple different ways. The teams that I've liked this season, Kentucky, Arizona, and UConn, they've had different guards who could do different things, and that's exactly what UConn has. And in this game, I think it's going to be big here. So UConn wins this one at home. Very big for the Big East standings because then they would have, I think, a 3-game lead on the next team in the conference, which would be Marquette. We have Kansas and Oklahoma at 4 p.m. Eastern. This one's at Oklahoma. I mentioned this one a little bit earlier, Greg.
I am going to take Kansas. Oklahoma is just they take the opposite treatment of those few SEC teams that I love. So I just keep picking against them. And if it comes back to bite me, it comes back to bite me.
I'm taking Kansas in this one. Picked against Kansas in the first game because McCullough is out. I think they said he was just kind of like banged up. So I think like giving him the Saturday, Monday off, and then giving him 4 days to heal or whatever math that works out to be. I think that works in their favor. They're going to need to, in this game specifically, I think pound the rock to Hunter Dickinson. It's not like that's not part of the game plan most games, but I just keep on feeding it inside. I think that's where the competitive advantage is, and I think they get the win. And again, Oklahoma, I still think they're a team that could surprise people in March, win a game or two, but just not their week. It's a tough matchup week for them. Last game we're going to pick, Greg, Kentucky and Auburn. This one's at Auburn, one of the toughest places to play in college basketball these last couple of years especially. Who are you going with?
I'm going to pick Kentucky. I think I might have accidentally given away your pick with a little hint that I gave when we briefly mentioned this game earlier, but I won't explicitly say it. This game is interesting to me, regardless of I won't say regardless of the Kentucky Ole Miss result. It'll just have the game will take on different meaning. If they win at Ole Miss, okay, or at home against Ole Miss, okay, this game it's big. If they lose at Ole Miss, you know what I mean, not against Ole Miss, not it's a home game. This game takes on a little bit of different meaning. It becomes, I don't want to say the sky is falling, but you've already kind of said it with that's where Kentucky fans are at. This becomes a very pressing game for them. These just happen to be two teams that I love very much, Kentucky and Auburn. This is another one of those just gut things. I this is the one that, and this is how it should be. I mean, I struggled to pick this game. You've got a top 5 KenPom defense going up against one of the best offenses in the country. It's just going to be fun to watch. But I'll take Kentucky to they haven't shot over 40% from 3 in a little while. I like them to get that done, and that's when they've been winning games, is when they shoot well.
I'm going to go with Auburn. I think...
Which hurts your soul. I know it does.
It hurts my soul that they're like that. It doesn't hurt my soul to pick against Kentucky. I pick with my head, not my heart. I would have told you 2 weeks ago, that Kentucky would win this game. I just didn't trust Auburn, but Auburn's... I'm telling you, it is an underrated place to play out in college basketball. It probably is top 5 in terms of environments, loudest environments. Obviously Fog Allen's still up there, but like they might be right behind Fog Allen, or maybe Texas Tech when Chris Beard comes back all the time, and that was pretty intense. But it's tough to play. It's a lot of young players. Getting DJ back will help. We don't know what his status is, how healthy that ankle is, how the rotations can be cut down. I took them to split because there's uncertain. The talent is there that they can win both these games, right? They just got to focus, show some heart, and they can do it. But with how bad they guarded against Graham Ike, imagine how bad they're going to do against Janai Broom. So possibilities are there. They have the talent to do it. They just need to show some heart. They've had apparently some team only meeting or player only meetings to help fix things, which they did last year when they got the 6th seed. Maybe they right the ship here. Like I said, trying to keep positive vibes here. That hey, UConn had 8 losses last year. UK has 7. There's a million teams in the top 25 who have at least 5 or 6 losses this right now. So it's not the year that I think people would have expected, but it does matter when you have all these different factors going in with DJ being out, with Trey Mitchell being out. It does matter. Those guys are important players. So we'll see. Hopefully they at least split. Or else I'll be a sad boy. Greg, any final thoughts for the week?
Well, first, it is only an 8-hour drive to Auburn from Cincinnati. So my wife's she's going out of town this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast. I haven't looked at ticket prices, but I was curious.
$410 is minimum. You want to?
Okay, all right. Never mind.
I told you.
All right,
Greg,
never mind.
I told you it was one of the toughest places to play. They're not going to go there for $2 like we saw in some of the non-conference games. Come on.
There is one other thing I want to bring up. Of course, college basketball season is still going on, and Joe is very humble, so I doubt he would bring this up himself in this forum. But Joe and Gamehouse co-owner Rob Haynes started this afternoon. Well, the first episode released. They're doing a Reds podcast called Reds Rundown. I found it on Apple. I'm sure he can tell you what other platforms you find it on. I did listen to the first episode, and as a somewhere around casual Red, I'm just not a big baseball guy, but I am a Reds guy. You know, just being from Cincinnati, I did enjoy listening to two people that I just enjoy listening to talk sports, especially about Reds, team I care about. So that is Reds Rundown. It is another Gamehouse podcast.
Thank you, Greg, for the plug. You're the plug king over here. It is available everywhere you get these podcasts for us. So whether YouTube, we're on YouTube for that one. This is a good opportunity for me to plug too. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. I think has them too. We push it iHeartRadio. We push it out there too. So get it wherever you want. My final thought, Greg, is I think we might start trying to record Sundays a little bit more because of the time crunch before games, but
especially with no NFL.
With no NFL too. But this Sunday, one to watch, Florida Atlantic at South Florida. Greg, we've talked off air about South Florida, as Luna says hi. 10-1 in the American. They don't have many quad 1 wins. They are an enigma, but Florida Atlantic almost lost to Wichita State to have their second loss of the week. They got bailed out by a foul call. It's Sunday. You can watch that. And Greg, if you still want to go on a podcast road trip, we can go to Purdue at Ohio State just to see Zach Edey play. Tickets are $19. That's a little bit more manageable. All right, so that's the final thoughts. Again, remember to like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Give us a rating. We appreciate it as we go along. We are looking forward to interacting with everyone as we go along with this college basketball season and get into March next month. For now, thanks for listening. We'll see everyone next time.